wait until it shows up because it was.
No, you're live, my dear.
Are you sure? Ladies and gentlemen, we are live here at Table Talks with a stellar group of people at this informal moment during Art Basel, Design Miami. I am Matylda Krzykowski. I'm part of Foreign Legion, and this is my partner,
Vera Sacchetti. We're delighted to be here today to discuss what makes a great generation for design, with, in fact, a great generation surrounding us. So I am going to do the honors and introduce everybody who's sitting here at the table. But I have a glass with half filled with champagne. Matylda has a glass with no champagne, and Matylda's going to take care of.
Who wants champagne? Everyone wants champagne?
Sure. Yes.
We have to celebrate great design.
Yes, there we go. And so I am joined here today by a fantastic group. I'm going to start here on one side of the table and sort of go around. Over there at the edge, we have Alena Halmes, and she is a product designer and a photographer. And she was nominated for the Swiss Design Awards this year with her project Augen zu. And then next is Matylda's empty seat, and next to Matylda's empty seat is Alexandra Gerber. She is also a designer, and her project, Untitled Picture Frame, was nominated for the Swiss Design Awards and won. Next to Alexandra is Anna Niederhäuser. She is the head of design promotion at the Federal Office of Culture of Switzerland, which is the strategic body that is responsible for drawing up and implementing Switzerland's cultural policy. So we're going to talk a lot about that just in a minute. Next to me is Professor Dr. Sarah Owens, who is an educator and researcher and currently affiliated with the Zurich University of the Arts. She was one of the winners of the Grand Award for Design this year. And here to my right, I have, fantastic. There we go. Wait. Here to my right, I have Studio AATB, which is Andrea, Anna, and Thibault Brevet. And they are designers based in Zurich and Marseille. And their project, Routing, was also nominated and won a Swiss Design Award this year. So gathered here around the table with a great generation of design, I want to start by talking to Anna and Sarah because I feel that the basis for any kind of great generation sort of lie in the support system that they have, but also, of course, in the educational system that they go through. So maybe I would start by asking Sarah. Sarah, could you tell us a little bit about your work for the last decade at the Zurich University of the Arts, and how have you seen design education in its present moment and how it is changing right now?
So I do think design, there's a market shift in the way I felt design is being taught maybe 10 years ago when I started in Zurich. I started before that a little bit working in Britain. But only those 10 years already showed that a lot of students were coming with different topics than they were about a decade ago. And they're really driving this kind of just wanting to know how can we push the boundaries of design. So the thing is really that I think design education needs to respond to that. It really needs to make sure that we're not just teaching one kind of perspective, but that we're really giving the students the possibility to encounter different perspectives, to be able to look at different approaches in order to really find out how they want to shape their own practice, but also how they want to encounter the world and deal with the world. In Zurich, I guess in Switzerland, there's still this legacy of modernist design, which kind of says, okay, there's a universalist way of approaching design. This is the right way to design. You just need to know how to do it. And I think this is also switching. It's where we have the moment at which where students come in and say, that's all fine, there's this history that we can build on, but we want to really know more. We want to have ways of first of all, dealing with our own history, dealing with our own topics and identity, and then also just going forward into a more pluralistic and maybe more multi-layered way of going about design. So that's kind of the big shift that I'm seeing, and I think some, design lecturers, they're still like very old school. They'll be like, we're gonna do this approach until we leave. But a new generation, I think, of lecturers are also coming up who want to create that platform for the students.
And how does your work contribute to creating that platform?
Well, I hope to kind of set that situation up. I teach, but I also am in kind of curriculum planning. I'm in heading the whole program. So I have to, on the one hand, I can be in the classroom and just support the students, and on the other hand, I have to make sure that we can also respond to these different shifts, which, for example, is saying, okay, let's teach a more inquiry-based design approach, for example. Can we do something like research or something close to it? Can we take different perspectives? How is that possible? What kind of workshops or people can we involve in order to have a setting which supports that?
Anna, your work also is sort of setting a base, a different kind of base for support and for encouragement of a development of potentially a new framework for how design could operate. Could you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you see the strategic importance of sort of sustaining emergent design approaches?
Yes, I would. First, I would like to say that I'm very happy to be here. When you asked me if I would join, I said yes immediately, I think, because I wanted to spend time with Sarah Owens. It's been, we haven't seen each other, and this is quite exceptional, because usually when we announce that to the winners that they won this Swiss Grand Award for Design, we get to meet them many times. We do a catalog together, we do the exhibition together. So I'm very happy to be here and also to have met you again. So the Swiss Design Awards exist since over 100 years, and it's quite exceptional. We can give 17 prizes each year, and each winner gets 25,000 francs. But it's not just all about the money. Since we're in Switzerland, it's sometimes less important than the label of the Swiss Design Awards. And I think maybe you can add to that, but I think it's also important for careers, for people who want to go further with this label. And everything, we are also quite lucky, because the platform we get is based on what people submit to this competition, and there's 250 each year, more or less, and the Federal Design Commission, which you, Vera, are part of, chooses then 50 that we can show here at Art Basel during 1 week, and then they choose the 17 awards, and this is like based on what we get, and then we have these 3 Swiss Grand Award for Design, where the Commission really can also have more influence if you want, and that is great. They're like discoveries and new categories. Somehow you have much more flexibility to react.
How does Swiss Grand Award actually work? So the Commission suggests?
Yes. And then you decide, and the Federal Office of Culture then validates the...
Yeah, the Swiss Grand Award is more like a career recognition, let's say, and the Swiss Design Awards, they work a little bit more like a kind of a strategic support at a moment where people's careers are kind of either taking off or they are sort of venturing into a new area that they want to explore and so on. But maybe, Anna, you could say some words about that from your perspective. I mean, this support is sort of a crucial thing, and I don't think there are a lot of countries in the world where this kind of encouragement exists at this career stage?
No, no, and it's not only the Federal Office of Culture who does that. We also have Provincia, and they do a lot of encouragement for the young. Since 2012, we don't have an age limit anymore. So we also have in the competition people who are established very much, and which makes it interesting. Of course, you can show a broad spectrum of what exists and what, because also established designers want to have this label, and established designers don't have a lot of money also, so that not always. Yes, what was the question?
I was wondering if you could comment on the sort of strategic importance of funding, but I think you already
yes,
did
I
that
mean,
with your answer.
it is important. We have projects that are in the stage of, they're not produced yet, so, and we can then with these 25,000 francs take, we hope we really push those projects to another level. And
I mean, maybe we can ask our esteemed young designers who are here on the panel.
I always wonder, when do we stop to say young? On
It's really late, when they're 40.
In architecture, at least, you get young architecture awards when you're 40. So that's young.
That's good. Before we do it, cheers all together.
Yes,
for-
cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, cheers, cheers. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Because one thing that struck me also very much of what you said, Anna, is because this is called table talks, you know, that's a terminology, a format that Vera and I thought is suitable to sit around a table, because that's when interesting conversations come around that are a little bit more informal than a, face-to-face conversation, like in front of a screen towards an audience. But what struck us in the talk that we just did before, the term the meeting, and that's what you also describe in your practice, and what you describe in the Swiss Design Awards is the meeting, you know. That's the importance also of this kind of formats that you've developed for people to meet.
Yes.
And in your case, intergenerational, which I found also very interesting in the Swiss Design Awards ceremony yesterday, hearing all these different types of perspective from all different types of scopes of lives, you know.
I mean, if you do not have that exchange, I mean, that really contributes to enrich sort of the network that you're creating.
Absolutely.
And I think since a few years now, you've been more interested in measuring and statistics and trying to really keep track of what it is that you're doing with this support system. And the network sort of gets more complex and more nuanced in this way. And I think that's a very sort of important step. But maybe I would like to hear from Alena, for example. This was the first time that you applied?
Yes.
And what was your experience? And what do you think about this idea of being part of this network? How was the experience for you so far?
So far, I have to say it's amazing to be part of it. It's so nice to be in the exhibition and to talk with people about the project, because for me also the process of my project, it was always about conversation, about perception. And so it's so interesting to get feedback from all the people who are visiting and other designers also, and especially also from other categories like illustration or graphic. Is so different, the feedback, and that's really for me inspiring to be part of it, and also, as you say, to build up this network and to exchange. It's so really inspiring.
Just a question.
Can I
please, of
quickly-
course.
Yesterday, one of the winners asked me if she or him, let's leave that open, could have a feedback from the jury why she won, and this never happened before.
Yeah.
People who don't win want to know what happened. And this, I think, is a sign also that there hasn't been much exchange in the last month. That was quite. It's never happened before.
That's an important factor, actually. But what it would interest me also, and probably everyone else here and everyone else there, is, there are these open calls, there are these possibilities, but there's this moment when you decide you want to participate in it, you know, and then there's this threshold of paperwork and bureaucracy that I heard from a lot of people who have thought about applying to the Swiss Design Awards, they don't want to do it because it's about reflecting yourself and bringing the seat together. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about your process? When was the moment when you really said, I want to do it, and who motivated you, or in which context took it place?
I have to say the motivation was Maya Ober. She was assistant at our school, and she was really the initial person who motivated me to participate. And that was 2 years ago, and then it was really too short to apply for, and I told myself, well, I will do it in 1 year where I can prepare as I want to and invest some time to make a portfolio which I am proud of or which I can stand behind. So then I made it 1 year later.
But did you wrote everything yourself? Did someone help you? Did you ask other people to help and support you? Sometimes it's the question of like support systems, like we don't do everything by yourself. Reach out to other people that can give you advice in order to do these things, and maybe that was it the same case with you?
Yes, for the text or kind of the feedback for the portfolio impression, I always ask other people because at some point I cannot see through anymore, and then it's so nice to get a feedback from outside about the content, about how it looks like and how they see it, and that was really important to develop this portfolio for the submission.
Great.
Maybe we can turn here to Andrea and Thibault. I mean, they are kind of maybe not veterans, but it was not the first time participating in the awards. And I was wondering, how do you see the sort of support system also in the way that you run your practice? Because, for example, in the case of Alena, you just graduated
yes, 2 years ago.
So you're
really
still
close,
kind of, your career is taking off. You guys have been working for a little bit longer than that. Could you tell us a bit about your path from sort of graduating to establishing your practice and defining how you're going to approach your work, and sort of how the Swiss Design Awards and these kinds of funding and support structures helped you in these goals?
I think it will help us a lot, as we have let's say an established practice, but still we have no financial security yet, or we still kind of reinvest a lot of money to always buy new machines. We invest a lot of money, so this financial support is definitely welcomed help in a way. But then also, as you said, Anna, I think the label is almost more important to us. I think it's, in a way, I think the money is important, but I think the label is
the recognition.
Exactly, and I think it will be an important step in our career in a way to finally say now
we don't have a business model yet. So we are producing apparently interesting work, but it's still very unclear how we are sustainably managing the business. So that's one step towards also convincing people more easily that what we are doing is not just up in the air, but there is actually something to back it up. I think like the studio we have established now took us almost 10 years of work and the studio was founded 3-4 years ago, but because we managed to become self-sufficient as independent designers, and then during this past where we were working tons of more like design service jobs, we could overwork ourselves to reinvest in creating this island of freedom. And so that meant that we did much more of what we had to do without any funding, because we were kind of self-funding the research practice. And now, through this award, through this funding, and through this sort of recognition that it brings, it's making us a bit more independent, as we can let go some of these side supporting endeavors. So Andrea still has an art direction studio. I was still doing a lot of websites until this summer, and we can slowly let the weight go off and take further off. So this is really where it's really interesting. But for us, it's a bit like a huge relief to finally have a bit more of fresh air to focus on the practice and not just figuring out how to pay the bills. When the practice we have is kind of hard to sell, or was hard to sell in the beginning, because we were kind of really experimenting with things that have absolutely no financial interest, and now things are kind of clearing up, so that's also good.
I would like to jump into this idea of a business model, or the not existing business model, because like, of course, the structure of the Swiss Design Awards is established, and it's, and we know about it now, and we just heard about it. But I sometimes wonder, if there's a possibility, for example, if a design studio would be interested to get this kind of business advice, if it ever could become a package of the Swiss Design Awards. I don't want to put anything on top of it, because it's already a lot. But I'm just thinking, maybe it's not a business model question, but then mentorship, like.
Probably Vicia, they do mentorship programs, and there was Creative Hub, or is still this, I'm not sure. But I don't know if this is the way it works, because I don't know. For not, for us it's not, we can't do it actually. It's like the law, we just give awards and prizes.
We
We were actually supported by Brevet. And it was extremely beneficial. It was so
the mentorship program.
Yeah, it was just mind blowing to see, like, we only had Zoom calls, unfortunately, but we had a kind of it was so nice actually to talk really of the business side of our practice and where we want to go, not only in a design way, but also kind of like where we want to go, how we can develop a sustainable business. And we are now again, luckily, in a second round of this support, and it's just I think it's highly beneficial for us to.
I always thought that this is what's really missing in design schools. That we did. Don't explain you how to make money. Never. No, but it's true. And how to, what you charge is very difficult, and when you just start, you just don't know what you're worth. And I found that's really missing from design schools, because it's so difficult to quantify, unless you really decide this is my hourly rate or my day rate. And that's one way that worked well for me, but it's very difficult to know what is this whole project worth. And it is impossible, in fact, to quantify it.
And transparency, in a way.
But is that not the associations? Would that not be like where you get those informations rather than schools? I don't know.
What associations?
Like
professional associations.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that
Like
also
How do you get access to professional association when you
knows?
start?
But maybe let's take a step back, because
But there
Alexandra
isn't
just spoke,
Yeah.
and I would love for her
Yes,
to also
exactly.
say a little bit about
Yes,
her
please,
practice. Just talk to us a little bit about the project that you have over there at the Swiss Design Awards. Tell us a bit about your approach, your practice, a little bit like your colleagues here just went through it.
Yes, so the project I presented at the Swiss Design Award is called Entitled. It's a picture frame system that changes a little bit the way you make a picture frame. So it's mostly about taking a technology from another field, which is the car industry. So I observed this car, this printed edge around the car windshield, the dotted one. And I thought it would be a nice technique to reuse to make a picture frame, which would remove the external frame and then just really make a flatter frame. And so the idea was to just find a solution for it to be a system. So I worked a lot on the different backing solutions and how this could work to become a new. It's an alternative to a picture frame, really, because there is not that many alternatives. So yeah.
So you also lead an independent practice, an independent studio.
Yeah.
But you're already since a few years, correct?
Well, yeah, I think 2016 or 17, something like this. I worked before that for other design studios for, I think, at least 5 years. until I then worked for myself. But I still do need to freelance to sustain myself financially, but I only work with one person. And it's really nice because we really have a relationship. He's an engineer, and I get a lot from also that relationship. And so that's kind of how I function. But I do work with brands. Like where now I managed to get a few brands that are interested in working with me. I would say that it was on the back of the last project I presented in the Swiss Design Awards, the shelf. From
Which
there,
year was that?
2018. From that moment, I got a little bit more attention, and then now I'm working more towards this thing of royalties, paid projects, and which I am interested, because to the opposite of Thibault and Andrea, I don't have a fixed space, and I realize that when I make things myself, I have to stock everything, and it takes space and it takes money to store everything. So I'm not in a setup where I can do this at all.
But what would be, I mean, like you won a Swiss Design Award, you have 25 grand at hand, you know. What? I mean, of course, everyone should go on a holiday. But you know, like I've seen your project. Every one of us saw your project, and I thought it's interesting because when I moved to Switzerland, I thought that everyone kind of the pinnacle of having a great frame in Switzerland means you have a Leni frame, you know. And I said to Anna yesterday, we have a replacement for the Leni frame. It's Alexandra Gerber's frame, you know. But then the question is, how does it become, or how do you think it could become reality? How are you investing that money? Are you giving it to a company, or are you trying to market it yourself?
There is really several routes that can happen with a project like this, and it's not the first time I'm in that situation, because I often do these kind of projects that are research that a lot of companies will not invest in. I think it was the same problem with the shelf a little bit. You have to prove the concept first until you get someone to be interested in it. So you can either find an editor that then, once he saw the project, is confident enough to invest money in it, or in this case for the frame, the other situation would be to really find maybe, I mean, 25,000 Swiss francs will not be enough to really, the idea would be to set up a company really, like that has a printing facility and a glass cutting facility. The backing is sorted out so that it's fairly standardized, and then they work on orders, like I tried to show on my Instagram post with the video, or also the video that is present in the show. Is that it would be something you can really upload your picture and then adjust the frame exactly like you want. You press add to cart, you pay for it, and they deliver it to you 2 weeks later, which is an okay time when you think a sofa takes sometimes 8 weeks to come or more.
But is that the dream? Would that be the dream for you?
It would be really nice if it would be like set up like this as a company, and I would be have some say in it. Like, I think it would be a nice, at least it would offer to the market a nice alternative, and it could, if it's done in the right condition with, like, you know, paying people properly and so on, it would be quite a clean factory.
I mean, I found it interesting that you talked also about this kind of precarity that you also experience, or this idea you also still have to freelance on the side. And I don't know about you, Alena, but do you also have side jobs to sort of support your design practices? Something that's kind of also happening to you at the beginning of your career?
Yes. So at the moment I am working at a glass blower here in Basel, 60%. So to have kind of a financial base. And next to that, I do photography and design projects. So at the moment, it's a bigger part where I have to do the financial job, which is also really interesting and gives me a new perspective on glass also. Because at first I thought there is only shiny and matte surface, but there is so many things in between. So it's also interesting for me as a designer to be there and observe. I'm drawing the technical plans. And next to that, I really want to focus on my design work, of course. And with the time, I hope to kind of shift and to make my design part a bigger one, and maybe at one point be really how to say that?
Independent.
Independent, yeah.
But would it be also work with glass, or are you thinking in which kind of direction would your practice go after? In
No,
your
it's
dream, basically.
No, I don't think it's only glass. That's kind of a, sag mal, Zufall.
Coincidence.
It's a coincidence that I can work there. But I was just really interested in the craftsmanship. That's why I'm working there.
That's with Matteo Gonet, no?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He also exhibits in the Design Miami. Not his name, but for Benda. Yeah, and that's really nice. But now I forgot what I wanted to say.
It's okay.
You have one of your objects there. Maybe it would be nice to
Yeah.
see
Yeah,
it.
let's do
Yes,
it.
I can show you.
I was wondering, I mean, Sarah, when you hear this, I mean, these are kind of realities that you're probably very used to hearing from previous students. Is it about, I mean, is it about changing the framework in which designers can operate? Is it about, wow, look at that, beautiful. Ta-da. Fantastic.
There's a lot of glass competition here going on.
I want to give it
away.
I want to
Hold
give
on,
it
this
its
one.
own.
And then
Its
we move
own,
this a little bit to the front so it can be seen better. Can we zoom into this? Oh yeah, perfect.
Beautiful. Look at that.
Maybe you can take a second one out also.
It's very nice. I mean, Sarah, I guess you have these conversations all the time.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, what if I'm hearing that students who are graduating and then still have to work on the side of being, so like this is like in acting, they're hustling on the side in order to make it. But then what is design education doing? It's exactly if we're not preparing the students for being able to work. But there's a long discussion about this. So are we preparing students for work? But there's also the vocational part, of course, here in Switzerland, which is very strong. So we're not supposed to be kind of the rivals of that. And then on the other hand, where does the more aspirational work come in? Or where do we have space for ideas to develop without that restriction of this needs to make money? So it's the in-between, I think that's, or the back and forth that also makes it hard for design education. Of course, students will say, why are we learning this? Is this relevant? But on the other side, it's, I'm so glad I have a lot of space just to think about something instead of always having this, I need to make it into money, I need to be able to buy something. And then on the other hand, it's really difficult because what happens if we're, like all these graduates go out and they're not even working in design. Like even when I graduated that was in the 90s, I would meet together with all of the people I graduated with, and we said, who's actually still working in design? And maybe
2 hands up.
She's like, I made it. No, I did. I'm working for, I don't know, I opened a restaurant. And everyone's like, cool. Just nice too. But on the other hand, we don't want to restrict that. We don't want to say, this is only one channel. Maybe design education can also be something that is more of especially on the higher level, like graduate education, that is more something of a education for the self. Like, what do I want to think about? What do I want to do? How do I want to shape practice? Where do I want to go? I don't need to stay within design. Maybe I'll take something else outside of another field and just mix this up. Or maybe I'm really interested in film and I want to do something with that, or whatever, just to give that space. But yes, of course, I mean, we don't want to kind of have like 100% of graduates not working in design. That would be a failure, of course.
I want to flip in a word that came across me when I listened to all of you, serendipity, And in a way, and all your projects, you know, like, I mean, you obviously you were driving a car and you stared at your window shield front for forever, and obviously you didn't have a designed project in mind, you know, like you know, and that's a little bit also the framework that you proposing, that it's sometimes these, I don't know, exercises or assignments that you encounter in design school are very goal-oriented, you know, and then that kind of very linear process intends to give a, you know, opportunity for you to come up with an idea. But we all know these ideas don't arise by a linear route, you know. It always is a side route, you know. Vera beautifully in the previous talk mentioned this kind of, you know, tension between failure and success that can be so close to each other in a way. And that's how I think, you know, also your project. I mean, you looked at something from a perspective of someone who you're not, you know, and you gave it a shape for us to read. Of course, maybe there's a strategic way in the way you designed it, but the idea didn't came by an assignment in a very narrow time frame, you know.
I mean, I also think about this idea of space. I don't know if you guys felt that in your education you had space for that kind of experimentation, for that kind of thinking a bit more freely.
I definitely think we did. But it was.
What did you study again?
Well, I'm thinking now in both schools actually I did. I studied in Art Décoratif de Strasbourg, but I did like a weird class called Object, which was basically materials. We just had access to all the workshops and we could do whatever, really. That was for the first 3 years. And it was funny, it's like one of these schools where no one goes to school, and if you are the one that goes to the workshop is for you. And it was so nice, there were the same people in the workshop, and that was good. But then it gave no direction in a way, that school. And so I did the ECAL after, and just the master, but it was the first years of the master, so they didn't quite know what to do with it, which maybe was a chance. And it was very open. And maybe that was really good, like, we had good teachers, that's for sure. And yeah, we had to kind of choose our own kind of project and work on it, at least the second year.
What makes a good teacher for you then?
What makes a good teacher? That's true. Sarah is a good teacher. I think it's just like people that are really ready to like go with your direction, like that are not forcing you in one way. And I think that's really a strength. I think I would be a bad teacher, for example. Frankly. I would be a little bit too directive, and I think people that are really able to be open about many different interests, like I think that's like really the skill of the teacher in a way. Like, yeah.
What do you guys think? Do you have space to do crazy stuff?
Now or before?
Before, when you were at school.
I think it's good to have space when you start to know what you're doing. We have taught a lot since we graduated, and we have seen some places where there is too much, like there is not enough direction too early, and it's actually not really beneficial to the students because they are kind of going in circles without even realizing what they are doing is not interesting. But once they start to master some tools or some knowledge, some skills, then it's super interesting to have space, and because you can start to shape your own interests. But if you can't even, if you don't know what are your interests at all, then it's kind of a bit sad sometimes to see that. We saw some places that were a bit like, okay. But I think like that's at least for us. Like I did the bachelor at ZHdK, which is quite well directed and so very goal oriented, if you could say. And then I did the master in fine arts, which was then a complete opening to basically explore everything I could not explore previously, because everything was graphic design, so it had to fulfill and tick the boxes of this is graphic design. And then we could continue to build our machines and experiments that were like printing research, but not really graphic design anymore, and really explode the box. And you also specialized a bit in type design and art direction, and I think when you start to know and master some crafts, then that's great. But yeah, like now we have our own workshop and it's really nice, and we have all our robots and all the machines, and we can really just in one afternoon build really advanced level of projects, because we are one thing we maybe to go to this idea of having a space where we can experiment. For us, we relied in the beginning of our practice on places like Fab Labs or maker spaces that have technical tools and provide you access. But very quickly, when you start to develop a professional practice that relies on this, it's kind of not really working anymore, because you hit the problem of people going there for more learning for fun or developing for the sake of learning and knowledge or sharing. And this is really great, but if you're working on an assignment for a client or something like this, then it's just two worlds that collide. And when you can't access some machines that you actually need right now to produce some things, it doesn't work. So we decided to really become self-sufficient and autonomous. So that's also why it took us 10 years of like acquiring all these tons of skills and equipment, but now we can really just do whatever we want. We don't have to ask anything to anybody. And so our space is actually that our practice requires a base level of technical facilities and equipment, and we had to build up the knowledge to use all this equipment, but this is now super interesting because we can really just build completely independently without doing any quote or asking any company to work for us, or even collaborating with other people. We like to collaborate, but sometimes it hampers a lot the process also. So sometimes we collaborate and it takes 6 months or a year to do a project, and sometimes we can do the same in a few days just alone. So it's we kind of like
your framework is already a collaboration between two
exactly.
people, right?
True. At some point we forgot about it. We just become one.
We're one.
Yeah, AATB.
One.
So
Fusing into that's
Alena, what about you? What about your studies? Were you given sort of interesting spaces to experiment, or were you also running around in circles like what Thibault was just mentioning?
I think at our school it was really nice. In the beginning we had a lot of practice where we could go into the workshop and experience all the material, which was really cool. And in the end, I managed to do a lot of experimentation, but not all of the students in this department do. In the projects, there are kind of titles, and within that title you can do whatever you want, but it's sometimes difficult to convince the teachers that this is good. So I also, sometimes it was a bit difficult for me during the project to, I kind of didn't get a lot of, wie sagt man, vertrauen?
trust.
A lot of, I mean, not always. In the end it was really good, but at some steps where I needed some trust that I can do experimentations and take some time to develop some things where I knew I had to do that to get further. There was a bit kind of a stressful moment, and that was a bit difficult to kind of push against that to do what I really wanted to develop, because my project was really a process. So in the beginning I really didn't know what I'm doing, and I was always really interested in what I was doing, but I really didn't know where I'm going, and that was really difficult to defend my position as a designer in that process. But I managed to really get this space to experiment through discussions with my teachers, and actually I have to say we had such a good opportunity to have all the workshops and all the possibilities open, and I was really glad to also have that. So I'm really happy to have studied there, because I learned a lot of technical skills also, next to the development of more conceptual base. So for me it was really nice to have this balance, but I would also wish that the conceptual side would grow more, and to really make a strong, develop strong projects and strong ways of thinking.
Anna, do you, in your work with the awards and sort of you come across variety of young and not so young, more established practices every year, and this conversation makes me think of sort of how the practice is evolving and how the concerns that one has when learning and when establishing a practice sort of are evolving, but potentially are evolving, I don't know, maybe very slowly from this sort of modernist ideal of what a designer should be doing and so on. Do you see an evolution in the practice in the projects that you are encountering every year? Do you see designers going in different directions, pushing boundaries?
Yes, we have an example here. But other than that, the developments are quite slow in the competition because we have this established system of who submits and who wins and what categories are the strongest, and it's what is happening in the design world doesn't reflect immediately in the competition. I think in a few years we will see more about what's happening. But we feel that, I mean, you can answer that question too. We feel that some things are happening and that it's a very, very interesting time for design also.
I would be actually interested in you answering this question because you've been in the jury for so many years now.
So many.
1.5 I have a feeling that you were since a few years.
Many.
1.5 would be short.
I mean, I actually wanted to ask Andrea and Thibault. I mean, your project is kind of like, okay, it's an object at the end, your routing project that won the award, but it is so much more than that. So how do you decide, okay, we're going to submit this into the product category, but you still manage to put like all these extra layers in it? Like, how does that decision happen?
5 to 12. I think we were really we were not planning for a long time. We just had it somewhere in our agenda, and then literally 3 days before, we could maybe apply. And they're preparing a dossier, and then, but in a way I find it funny because now we have been awarded in the product design category, and we both are a graphic designer and I'm a type designer, and Thibault is a studied art. So now for the second time now we get nominated in the product design category, and that is a little bit funny. I don't know, but it's.
It could be in both. I mean, it's just our work, we stopped kind of caring too much about the labels. Because it's just reducing into, or it's not reducing it, but it's preventing you to see all the other components. Then, it's just a product, so a lot of people will only see tiles on the floor. But it's actually a whole way of thinking about the way the product got built and developed, and that it's actually code that emerged the pattern, and then we had to think about all this way of translating the pattern onto a physical object, and then when we have this object, we had a virtual model of the object. How do we produce this into a real physical? It was just so many layers, and it's not just a product. It's also
But I mean, it almost seems like you have to learn how to speak a certain language in order to be recognized, even if your practice is not so worried about labels or about how would I then categorize this thing. I mean, it feels like you still have to respond to a certain system. And I don't know, Sarah, do you see your students sort of defying labels more and more as well, or?
I guess since we're so project focused, that conversation used to come up, but it's not so much anymore. So we'll say it doesn't matter if you're doing a film or if you're doing a performance. It doesn't have to be a book in order to be graphic design. It doesn't even have to be graphic design. That's why we try to call it visual communication. But then on the other hand, I thought, okay, let's take the visual part away too, because we could just have a conversation, and that's something that designers can design as well. But I really like that idea of saying, well, maybe it doesn't really matter that much that we were trained as graphic designers or studied under that label. We can submit our project in various categories and just see also maybe what that perspective makes out of the project. Because I like what you just said, people might see it as that, but when there's a different category under it, your perspective changes on it, right? So that's very nice.
It's really interesting. It's a really good point, because I mean, it really, our projects and our work, it always lives under the mediation of different lenses, of different screens, of different people, of different perspectives. And I think people can only shape their narrative up to a certain point, and maybe at some point you also have to sort of let go and just be like, read it as you want. I mean, I don't know, what do you guys think of this?
That's, I think, a bit something that we have observed also. I mean, when we studied at École, it used to be very, very separated. Like we, as graphic designer, I was in the workshop down there, but I never really did something. And I think we were not really encouraged to use other facilities. Even they have a great cinema studio, they have great workshop facilities. And I felt it was really very separated between the graphic design, product design. And we have thought, for example, in France, where they just teach design. It's not even like they don't even specify between product design and graphic design or whatever. And I think sometimes it's also a bit problematic because then they're not specialized. They can basically, during their studies, they can just choose whatever they want, either in the product design or in the graphic design or other departments. But in a way, I find it also very beautiful to not separate the fields. And I feel that since we have graduated maybe 11 years ago, I feel a bit in Switzerland it's a bit opening up. They're trying at least to mix students or to do more interdisciplinary projects, and I think that's also what we try to do, I think, and that's for us super encouraging to just try new things and try new techniques, even we don't know nothing about them.
But Anna, how would, after we heard that there's some sort of kind of idea of maybe abolishment of the subcategories of design, how would that possibly affect the Swiss Design Awards? And is that even possible to take the subcategories away and say, okay, we're going 15 things to
Everything
design?
is possible.
No, but I would like to, sorry, just to interrupt, I would like to ask for the possibility of more champagne. Do you have the bottle? Sorry to interrupt.
More categories.
More things to talk about. We have an emergency.
No, just this side of the table.
My goodness, you should have told me earlier. Here we go.
Sorry, the possibilities.
We also have to mention quickly, guys, you cannot believe how hot it is in this studio.
Oh my goodness. It's like...
Justifying
The
my
Owens.
first.
This was discussed recently, intensely, in the commission, and everything was discussed, and everything was also tried out. There were, I think 18 years ago, there were no categories. Everybody could just submit like this, but this was stopped again after a few years. Apparently, it didn't work. So, but now the commission agreed on adding 2 categories: research and media interaction. So, and this will be from next year on. Yeah.
Cheers to that.
We have definitely cheers to
Finally.
Cheers. Cheers. Totally cheers on that.
Yes.
I even had another thought standing at the Swiss Design Awards yesterday, thinking about, because it's so nice to see with different practices, different disciplines, different ideas, differently educated, people basically being, exhibited at once. But then I ask myself, can I see the themes clearly? What are the themes of each practice? And I was even thinking what it would be if you would think about the exhibition not necessarily as something categorizing the disciplines, but pairing, and even the art, you know, like, I mean, we are in a building together with, downstairs is the art awards and the Swiss design awards are upstairs. Some people also, I knew or got the feedback that they were lost and they were first time in Basel, first time in Halle 3, and they couldn't even like differentiate naturally in the beginning, you know, only a little bit later on realizing, oh yeah, okay, clothing, fashion design or whatever, you know. But I mean, Afterwork Studios did this installation. I mean, I would expect to see something like that in the world of art, you know. But I was wondering what it would be, what would happen if you would think about themes, you know, urgencies of themes that
But
you would apply.
we did that. We did that on in the mediation. We have a lot of freedom. We can do whatever you want. And one year, we had these themes, topics on the blog. You wrote as well. Remember. And then we made every time we did this workshop after we knew who was in the second round, and we defined 5-6 topics and then paired and that was really nice. We came to the conclusion that nobody really wrote those texts, read those texts. So we stopped it because it was a lot of work and. But it was very, very interesting. Those workshops were amazing. And
but workshops were for the participants? Or?
No, just a team thinking about what. But it was so cool to.
But sort of creating these groups and connecting
clusters.
the dots also, because I think one thing is a list of names, right? And okay, here's the people that are nominated. What does that tell you? Okay, they are product design or whatever. But on the other hand, it was also about. What connects these works? Can we identify topics for this batch of people? And I think that was...
But it was interesting. We never got any feedback from the designers as well. So there was not like, oh, how interesting you did that. I don't know. It was just... I hope we can do it again. It's just... you have to put the focus on something each year. And this year. We have an amazing blog, an amazing visual identity this year. So it was like
but on the other hand, some things cannot be planned. I mean, last year there was no exhibition,
of course,
but you responded so nicely with having a catalog, you know, having a series of talks, you know. So I mean, it's. I think it's interesting, or it's really important that some formats, you know, that are established, and then people like, you know, like it's like it resonates to people because they know what the package is. But it's also nice to be surprised in between. I mean, we were negatively surprised, or unexpectedly surprised last year due to the circumstances. But I still think that these are possibilities to question certain formats also, and looking at them from a different lens.
of course, that's what makes everything interesting.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course. Responding makes everything interesting also.
So I think I would like to go back to this theme of a great generation. I don't know what that would mean for you guys. I think for us it means a generation that sort of breaks the mold and defines new pathways for what design can be, and in different fields and to different extents. We think that all of you that are here today are doing that. So I don't know if this idea of great generation sort of sparks any idea in your minds, and also as practitioners, maybe you are not so much into reflecting on your own practice and sort of like using superlatives to discuss your own work. But I wonder if you could formulate a wish for this great generation, what would that be?
Or a thought, just in
Or a
general.
thought.
maybe I can start, because I think it would be great if the community of designers would be stronger than it is now, because I think for us sometimes it's quite hard to have this body of designers who stand in for themselves, and that would be a good thing for us. I think this community feeling.
But I guess it's also not just community, it's also like just feeling that people want to communicate. I mean, I feel that too. But it's a bit special for me. I live in London, and actually I don't, because I haven't studied the RCA, and it's really school-based, I feel really that I don't know many product designers at all. My boyfriend is a graphic designer, he's British, so he knows loads of graphic designers. So all my friends are graphic designers, or it's true. It's a bit photographers or art directors. Honestly, like I would say a good 70-80%. So it's funny how it's like really groups of people that are formed through schools a little bit, and then there is nothing after the schools. At least for our generation. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you guys know other, but like I don't feel like it's very strong in that respect. Yeah, I mean that would be actually really nice. I agree that there is something for people to discuss. This like also quite recently I had this conversation. I've been invited to a show. It was only girls, and some girls had a real problem with it. That it was an only girl show, but on the back of it, they really wanted to have a conversation about it, and nothing happened. Again, like nothing. This conversation never happened, and it's a shame. I still think it should happen, but like this is these things where there is no place and no moment for these conversations, and they should really exist.
Take place. How about you, Alena?
Yesterday I really enjoyed talking to all the designers which were in place, and it was so nice to get to know them. So I really think it would be nice to have more surroundings like that, that you have the possibility to meet. So that's really cool that there was this possibility. And for the future, or in general for design, I wish that there is more conceptual work, which is not only an object which can be sold, but more conceptual, which can bring society further in any direction or in any sense, may it be social or environmental or something else. But I really would love to see everyone doing and fighting in this direction in the Department of Design.
I might make a remark that the Switzerland being quite expensive for independent designers means a lot are going abroad, and there is a very strong satellite community of Swiss designers and Swiss artists who are kind of in most major cities and who are quite tightly knit there. Like when we were in Berlin, when you're in London, when you're in Paris, like even now in Marseille. There's kind of like groups of Swiss designers and artists, a bit like spread around and but know all each other, and so this is quite I think interesting. But Switzerland also enjoys a vast oversea or like a broad network of places where people are much more able to experiment because of the lower just cost of not cost of living, but the cost of taking risks. And I think that's also why we have most of our production facilities not in Switzerland, because it would be not we would not have a practice otherwise. And in these places, I think it's quite well connected.
It's working.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because you have spaces where it's actually not free, but it's much more accessible, and that's maybe the part where Switzerland. In a way that the downside is that you don't have such easy access to spaces where you can just freely experiment, because there is always very quickly this question of costs. And so just costs, if it's just too much, it's just not there or not possible. So so that's also where it's extremely important that there is this strong funding network that creates this possibility when the market pressure is so high. So I think that's
Andrea, you want to add something to it?
No, I think that's it. We share a bit the same point.
Okay, very good. Maybe Sarah, you?
Yeah, it was just, I agree with all of you in that sense. And I was just thinking, I know that this pressure is very high. What I would like to wish for this generation also that is graduating or establishing itself is to keep asking the very difficult questions. So just keep challenging this discipline and say why are we educated this way? Why do we have to work within these conditions? why are certain people seen as successful but not others just because they have certain commitments like family or care work and so on. Why can't they ever be seen as good designers, for example? And these hard questions, not to provide answers, but to kind of keep, hold the institutions and the community and the associations and the awards accountable also, to say, okay, we keep wanting to also reflect on ourselves how we want design practice to evolve and where we want it to go. So I know it's very hard to go out and establish yourself, but don't become complacent. Like keep coming back saying, we want this, we want that. You have to account for this, you have to answer that. I think that would be great.
Is it easy for you guys to not become complacent? Is that a good reminder?
I don't know.
Maybe.
I mean, I feel if you're trying to like sort of pay the bills,
I know,
sometimes
I know.
it's not
It's
so.
not about really complacency, it's more about being tired. It's exhausting
That's a
to,
good-
it's
that's a good
exhausting.
point.
Like we fought many times to just shut everything down and go work in an agency because it's just, there are some days you just long for having a salary because it's really, sometimes really tough. Like it sucks to let go people, it's not fun. A lot of times we didn't go on holiday, like we are gonna use a bit of the work to finally go on holiday.
That's also
Because we didn't go, like because there are so many sacrifices. So it's not complacency, it's just like exhaustion.
But that's where you're going into like questioning the working conditions. Because I really have a problem with this myth where it says designers have to work day and night, it has to be their whole life, and then you barely make a living. Like, why is it like that? Can we do something about this? And I know it's when you're in this situation, it's like, how can I even change something? But exactly when we have those conversations and the community comes together, maybe we can develop ways of supporting each other so we can have these different working conditions.
Yep. Definitely.
Yeah, in that sense, the community and the network, they have kind of the potential of becoming spaces, not just of connection, but also of strengthening each other's sort of alternative views of what the practice can and should be, you know? And I agree with what you guys say. It's very exhausting. It's it's tiring, and it's also like, also the work of coming together, of creating the community, of making sure those spaces exist and are kind of readily available for people to sort of, I don't know, vent, meet, exchange ideas and so on. Someone still has to do that. Someone still has to pay for the space. Someone still has to make sure that it's there and so on. Someone has to sort of you know, stack the chairs at the end of the day and put the tables away and so on. And that is and who is paying for that, and how is it that we are creating those spaces? And I think with the pandemic, one thing that happened is that many of those spaces became digital, and sometimes the digital space became a space of encounter because we were forced to migrate in a very sort of, I mean, we were already there, but we were forced to sort of depend on it heavily, much more than we had before. So I think the question is also in this moment when you see that there's a huge transition happening, we're in the middle of it. I mean, the sort of economic consequences of this pandemic still have not hit us fully, but they will. The creation of those kinds of spaces, I think, is more important than ever. And here's my plea to the network that is created by the Swiss Design Awards and the Grand Award for Design, is that network has that potential of becoming that catalyst, and maybe it is already to a certain extent. Yeah, I think that could be a great thing for this great generation.
I love your optimism, but I always think if you're comfortable, you won't change anything. Even though there's an urgency for that update around design. But we can hope and we can work on it. starting with this conversation and putting them into practice. Should we end at this note?
Yes, sounds like a very honorable goal.
Or does everyone else has a final remark?
What are many, but I think.
So I think we should close our live stream for now, and we're just all going to have another glass of champagne. Without you guys, sorry. So thank you very much, everybody.
Applause.
For taking
Thank
the
you.
time. Applause.